You're listening to the Emulsion Podcast, a show that informs and inspires the restaurant industry to work, live, and create better. My name's Justin Khanna, and I'm a chef and media producer with almost 10 years of experience in award-winning restaurants all over the world. I created this show as a way to give back, to inspire the next generation, and to help you progress your career. The Emulsion Podcast is sponsored by you folks, and Patreon is where that happens. If you're here as a return listener and you enjoyed the episode you just came from and happen to want to support more episodes, I'd really appreciate it. Go ahead and check out patreon.com/Justin Khanna. Thanks in advance if you can. I totally understand if you can't. Free ways you can support this show include leaving a like or comment on this video, filling up all 5 stars on iTunes, or simply sharing an episode with a friend. This is an interview show. If you missed out on asking your burning question to today's guest, don't let that happen again. There is a really handy-dandy form where you can see upcoming guests and ask them your questions. Be sure to check out justinkhanna.com/podcast. I'd encourage you to see who I've got coming up.
Being in the trenches is as grueling as those 10-hour days can be. You're fighting through service, and you get to the end, and there's something about breaking down your station and looking around, and everybody's kind of winding down, cleaning their cutting boards and tidying things up, and something about that kind of sensation and feeling is something I think most cooks will probably always miss once they aren't in the kitchen every day.
What is up, folks? So grateful to have you here. Today's guest is Chris Hill. I always want to say Chef Chris Hill, but he is so much more than that. A little rundown of Chris's background. He grew up in Atlanta and attended the prestigious Westminster School. From there, he moved on to the University of Alabama, where he double majored in English literature and Spanish, and then went on to earn a master's degree in marketing. Upon graduation, he accepted a position with a boutique marketing and management consulting firm, and they worked with a bunch of different Fortune 500 clients, so he's used to working with these really big brands. After a little more than a year, though, he had a massive change of heart and followed his passion into the world of cooking, a passion that he'd pursued since high school. Eventually, he opened up his first restaurant at the age of 28, growing into the role of executive chef, but nowadays, Chris wears the hat of author, speaker, teacher, chef, and mentor. You will often find him posting articles on Medium about topics very similar to mine about how to progress your career as a professional chef. But then he'll also talk about the personal branding and networking side of things. He also spends a couple of days a week teaching culinary classes in Virginia, where he lives now. We definitely dive a little bit more into that into the show. But it was a sincere pleasure of mine to have Chris on the show. Him and I are very much so two sides of the same coin. He's definitely a much better writer than I am. If you folks haven't checked out any of his articles, put that on your to-do list right after this episode. His page on Medium is linked up in the show notes. But for now, let's get into our conversation. Yeah. You are the first podcast guest that I've had on that has like pages upon pages upon pages of backlogs in Google because you've done so many interviews.
Nice.
Which I love. Nice. So I tried to make some of the questions ones that maybe you haven't been asked before, which is hopefully exciting for everyone involved.
Yeah, those are always fun. It's fun to answer the same old questions, but yeah, it's fun to. And I think I'm trying to think. I feel like you have more of an appreciation for the industry, or maybe it's a different appreciation for the industry with kind of the way you've worked your way through and what you're doing now. So, I think it could be.
It's
cool.
A huge reason why I wanted to have you on the show, because we get along on so many of the principles and I feel like we say the same things. It's like, but it's not in the cliche way where the head chef will be like, keep your head down or work hard. You're actually like giving some tangibles along with that, because it's easy to say that because it's like that's what you want. Of course, you want your employees to work hard and be patient and all that, but you come at it with a different flair. So
I think for a long time I did kind of come at it from that like cliche place, because like you said, it is easy, but are you leaving this person in the situation like in a better place than how you found it? Probably not.
Sure.
So yeah.
To start, I'd love with a little kind of state of the union from you on your thoughts on chefs and media in this kind of 2018 environment, especially from your perspective, because you've had experience and success in the chef realm and then in the media realm.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on, Justin. It should be a lot of fun. I think we're at a crazy place and an awesome opportunity for chefs and for restaurants to the last 20 years has been a real renaissance with, the farm to table movement, popping up maybe 20 years ago. Now you're able to get, fresh ingredients really anywhere in the country, world for that matter. And I think there's a great opportunity. It's an interesting dynamic though, because you look and there's a lot of young cooks that aren't used to the old kind of quote unquote brigade system where you work your way up and you're the kind of doing the bitch work for however many years. And now there's a lot more thinness in restaurant kitchens. So you kind of, hop on the line after maybe 6 months of washing dishes. And then, 2 years later, you might be the sous chef, which, back, a couple of decades ago, that'd be a 10-year course. So it's interesting to kind of see how that's playing out. And obviously the challenges with keeping good staff, keeping, being able to take care of the staff. Those are all concerns that I think we all have. And it'll be interesting to see how things go, especially with a lot of the technology that, just yesterday, somebody posted on my Facebook wall a robot that was literally creating a dish from start to finish.
I saw that. It was like the robot arms, right? They were like white robot arms. I saw that, man.
Insane. So, I think now more than ever to tie in, media, I think now we have the opportunity to brand ourselves and to really create, something unique with, our style, with what we want to do and represent with our cuisine, and the ones that are going to be able to, stand up against everyone else are the ones that are going to be able to stand out,
right.
and do something that's unique and interesting that tells a story about what they think and about how they see the world.
Do you see it as being kind of like one and the same, being a chef and being a media personality? Like you have to have both?
Yeah, I don't think you had to, 3 or 4 decades ago.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was doing French cuisine, and if they weren't doing French cuisine, they were at a country club somewhere or maybe at a hotel. And as long as you make the numbers work, you kept a decent food cost and your labor wasn't too high, then you had job security. And I think job security was kind of the number one most important thing, across the board. We didn't have this insane food culture we have now. Now you look around and there's competition everywhere. So yeah, I think now to be able to really stand out, to be able to be in this for the long haul, I think you have to stand out. I think being part of the media is something that you have to do. And I think the older chefs would probably kind of laugh that off. But in reality, if you want to have control over where your career goes, that's really the only way moving forward.
Right. It's something I'd be interested to jam with you on, because it's something that I'm just thinking of now as as we're having this conversation, because I've been going a little bit like rah, market yourself, like publish some content, get yourself out there. But, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if there is that person who's in the media, whether it's the chef owner or the restaurateur or whatever, they need that person to do all the back end. They need that person to manage the employees and be in the restaurant from day to day if they're going to be out marketing themselves. Maybe there's because everybody now is wanting to be in the media, maybe there's about to be this huge demand for the behind the scenes person. Do you think that there's any truth in that? Or do you think there's room for everyone?
Yeah, for sure. I think we actually just got off a conversation with Scott Conant for my podcast, and he was talking about, he had just opened up a new restaurant out in Las Vegas on, I think it was Valentine's Day, but he's got restaurants all over the country. Obviously, he can't be in every single location at any given time. A lot of days he probably isn't in any of them. So yeah, definitely having somebody that you trust to execute is, I think, massively important. And one of the interesting things that I've heard a lot, really, especially with the podcast, we had Richard Blaze on not too long ago also, and they both kind of said the same thing, which is to be able to have good people that you trust to take care of your staff, to take care of the employees, take care of the customers and the product. you really have to be able to grow so that you can find new opportunities for people within your company.
Right.
So I definitely think that's a piece of it. At the same time, I think, depending on the message you're putting out there, obviously, sharing the message of the product itself is a good way to get some mass media on what you're doing. But at the same time, maybe you just like for Danny Meyer and Union Square Hospitality Group, a lot of what they do is obviously great food and great customer service, but the media that they talk about is part of the operations itself.
Sure.
So I think there could also be a place where you merge the two together.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's funny. I called in to when Danny Meyer was on the Ask Gary Vee show the other day. And they actually took my question, so I was on the show.
Oh, really cool.
And I asked him a question about I wanted so bad for Danny Meyer to answer it, but Gary kind of took over and did his thing with it. But I was asking him about social media and how he delegates out the posting of social media in his restaurants. And I mean, I obviously didn't get a very secure answer from him, but I think part of why he's been able to be successful is because he puts people around him to put that media out there.
Yeah, for sure.
As opposed to posting it himself.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that every morning he sits down with his chief operating officer, Richard Curate, who actually I wrote about in my first book, and we actually had him on the podcast probably a couple months ago. And a lot of what he talked about was, them entrusting their employees and trusting their staff to make the right decisions with a sense of doing the right thing. And maybe they do the right thing, maybe they don't, but that they're coming from a place of goodwill and trying to do the right thing. And that I think also kind of comes back to having the right people around you. If you hire people, especially they do such a great job of retaining talent, of bringing the right people in because people understand what they're about, then I think it makes it a lot easier to trust people around you.
Sure. And that's a double-edged sword, which is the best part about it, is that if you're putting out media that's telling like truthful, honest media about what you're doing as a brand, then that's like kind of like an automatic filter for job applicants because they know exactly what you're about. And then
exactly
when that hiring process happens, they know exactly what they're getting themselves into because they've been following you for the last 9 months.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if you saw actually recently, talk about being transparent. Danny Meyer was talking about, they've eliminated the tipping. I think it's gone company wide now, but one of the things that he came out saying was that they end up having a lot more front of the house turnover because of the no tipping now versus what they really kind of thought it would be. So
I was going to ask, do you think that the reason that the front of house turnover is so high because of the no tipping thing is because they don't have the advantage of having the tips anymore because there's none of that extra revenue coming in?
Yeah, so I think the front of the house staff, saw that. I mean, in New York City, you also have to make a certain amount of money, to be able to live there, as you know. And I think that the front of the house staff was making, let's just say, $60,000, $70,000 a year. Once this went into effect, they were maybe making 55.
Got it.
I mean, that's just throwing it out there. So then, all right, well, now you still have to, pay your whatever all your expenses are, living in New York City, and maybe they just felt like they could join someone else and do something else more effectively. So to be able to take care of themselves.
It's interesting because there's it's been something that's been taking off in Seattle here as well, where they will do the 20% add-on service charge, and a lot of people aren't the biggest fans of it because they think that it makes the service staff lazier and they are less likely to want to give you good service because they're wanting to work for that tip money. And it results in a poor quality of service, which in Seattle doesn't really fly because we're a customer service town with Amazon and Microsoft being all over the place. So I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to see. It's like a culture shift, and it's interesting to see how it reverberates and ripples out when these decisions are made. Right.
Well, and I think Danny, he felt very confident. I'm sure he still probably feels very confident that their customers are getting good service, the same service they were before. I think he actually might feel like it removes a layer of tension. Some people could say that some people could flip what you're just saying and say, well, I feel like this person is giving me great service only because they want a tip.
Got it.
And now he could say, well, people are here to take care of you because they are here to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, definitely an interesting dynamic for sure.
Totally. I'd love to take it back for you, and if you have any stories, I'd appreciate you sharing them. But I'd like to know how you got your first kind of in with restaurants back when you started, because you didn't start with restaurants, and if there were any particular obstacles or kind of failures that you had to go through as trial by fire when you first got your in with restaurants.
Yeah, so my first restaurant job was at 17, working at the Atlanta Fish Market. That was really just kind of a make some beer money for the summer, about to head off to college next year. But then I went to school, then I actually went into marketing for a little while. Along the way, I worked in restaurants kind of here and there throughout. Started working with my brother on a catering company. And really my first kind of opportunity, I guess, that presented itself was my cousin owning a restaurant up here in Virginia. It was essentially in shambles, and they needed to kind of overhaul everything. So he brought me in. I didn't have a clue really, how to manage people, how to manage the operations, how to manage costs. At the same time, though, I knew that what they were doing wasn't working. It was supposed to be a high end kind of upscale sports bar, I guess you'd call it. And what it really ended up being when I got up here was that it was a lot of, pre-made stuff that was just kind of drop it in the fryer. All the sauces were pre-made. If they were using tomato sauce, it was from your number 10 can, that kind of thing. And I said, and he asked me, Chris, why do you think that this isn't working? Why is the staff kind of just complacent? Why don't they care? And it was very clear to me that they didn't have any sort of ownership of the product.
Right.
It was a long kind of 6-month overhaul, but we ended up turning their kitchen to a from scratch. So everything was made in house. Everything was all the soup, sauces, all the meat was broken down in house. Everything, which was a great lesson. And on the other side, seeing all the employees, feeling confident and empowered, and also proud of the work they were doing. But I mean, he and I along that way had a lot of arguments and conversations about the right thing to do, and it finally ended up working. But probably the biggest thing I learned moving on from there was he and I opened a restaurant together, and I was it was on a shoestring budget. I was working full time to kind of pay the bills, and we opened up the restaurant. Long story short, we got open, but didn't have any recipes in place. Didn't have all the processes and the procedures and the things that we could share with our staff. That this is how we're going to do things. And as a result, the product was very inconsistent. It was good, but it wasn't consistent. So I was actually kind of married to the business and could never really get away. And then finally, we got things standardized. This is how we're supposed to do things. This is how it's supposed to look. This is how it's supposed to taste. This is how much of this you put in there, and made my life a lot easier.
Right.
As you can imagine.
To me, the takeaway from that would be kind of like you can make it easy for your staff, but you have to have that balance, right, of making it easy enough for your staff so that they can execute it, but also give them the freedom to take ownership of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things to do some consulting sometimes that I encourage is sit down with your staff every Tuesday and at least your back house staff, and make sure that everybody brings 2 ideas for specials to the meeting on Tuesday, and this weekend we'll use somebody's specials from the meeting. That way everybody's bringing something to the table. They feel like they're a part of the process. I mean, whenever we would, in the early days of the restaurant, whenever we would have a seasonal menu change, my business partners and I would sit down and I'd say, well, let's bring the kitchen guys in here. And my partners were insisting on, well, they're not the ones making the decision here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, but they are the ones making
Totally.
And the more they feel like they're a part of what we're doing, then the more they're gonna kind of buy in and feel like it's something they can stand behind and be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's especially important, these days where a lot of what we talk about and the challenges we have is being able to pay staff enough to keep them around. Well, one of the ways we can quote unquote pay them is to give them tools and resources and a certain sense of gratification through the work they do that will keep them coming back for more.
Right. It's that like value isn't always monetary kind of thing, where it's like I would rather be happy and feeling creatively fulfilled in a job rather than get a couple extra bucks at the end of the month.
Yeah, I think we all would.
Yeah, absolutely. To take it back, there's a lot of people that will listen to this show that are just starting off in the industry. They're culinary students. They're just got their first line cook job. You have a quote that says, "I think another way to get your feet wet in a cooking career is through food blogging." Does that kind of stand true to you? Do you think that would be something that would be still valuable, or maybe even more valuable now?
Yeah, and I think food blogging. Maybe I would change that a little bit and say, industry blogging. A lot of what I do now, or what you do, creating conversations about the industry. The first article I wrote that went viral, Dear Chefs, I think you might have read it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone could have written that, but I chose to, and as a result, it was able to kind of give me a foothold on starting to create a little bit more relevancy around myself, and suddenly people cared about what I had to say, and most of which had never tried my food. And for me, I kind of went down a different route. If I had gone to CIA like you, or had gone the more traditional route and gotten in a little bit earlier, I might not have gone down the talk about the industry as much. But for me, that kind of felt like the easiest and maybe the most compelling way to create some relevancy around myself, was to connect with people in a way that was comfortable and felt right to me.
Right. Do you think there's a certain value in blogging from a beginner's perspective? Because you and I both kind of didn't start putting ourselves out there until we had a decent amount of kind of confidence in what we're doing and what we're having to say. Like we had something to say, so then we started saying it. I encourage a lot of young people to kind of start documenting what they're doing. Easy, right, to get up on that soapbox and say like, this is bullshit, or I had a shitty day at work because XYZ, and you're really just looking like an asshole because you don't actually. If you give it a few years, it's like that thing that your parents always say, right? Like you'll understand when you're older, kind of thing.
Yep.
And I fear that if I encourage people to put themselves out there too much, there will be too much of that kind of like peacocking around instead of. Where's your advice on that? When do you start actually putting yourself out there?
Well, I think you can put yourself out there without having all the answers. And I think that's one of the most important things is to, and I still try and say, hey guys, like I'm in this with you, trying to figure this out for myself as well. Do you have any suggestions? But I think coming at it from that kind of place is super helpful. But one thing I think blogging does, and I'm not talking about the traditional food blogger where you're putting your recipes out there. I mean, that can be nice too, but when you're the type of conversations that I'm trying to have is where talking about like important things in the industry that a lot of us are dealing with on a daily basis, where we're all trying to figure out the best way to kind of navigate these things. And asking questions, I think, is maybe the most important thing a blog does. Even if you have a pseudonym where you don't even publish on your own name, but if you just write and share with whoever, could just be your family or friends. If you share what is on your mind, some of the questions you're asking, you start really getting to know yourself better and getting to know what you think people out there might actually connect with, and then you kind of start to create your voice. But the only way to create your voice is to actually start creating it.
Right, right. You have transitioned much more into writing a lot more, which is something that I am currently dealing with. I write all my own video. I write all my videos out as like a script, and writing is something that I would never felt comfortable with. And so it's something that I'm still kind of learning and growing. Do you have any authors that you've either gotten a lot of inspiration from or that you recommend people start with if they're looking to read a little bit more about writing or success even?
One of my probably favorites in the industry is Michael Rollman.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote Mind of a Chef, Soul of a Chef. I think it's Becoming a Chef.
Yeah, something like that. I read it way back in the day.
Yeah, like where he goes through CIA and he kind of tells the story. He was originally just a writer, and then he kind of fell into food really through that whole experience. But I think finding someone anyone really who you can kind of relate to is helpful. Mm-hmm. Then it makes it a little bit more exciting. And then just reading a lot and getting different perspectives, because when you're younger, I think you kind of gravitate to what is easy and comfortable and what you think people might be interested in hearing. But then once you read more and more, you realize there's different perspectives and there's different ways to look at things, and that kind of the more well-rounded your understanding of a certain topic is, the better you're gonna be able to kind of dive into it. So
right.
I think just reading a lot is maybe the best thing.
Totally. And I'm gonna ask it right now because it's a question I had that I was gonna ask later, but I feel like you answered it in a way that relates to writing that I often speak about with food, and it's the importance of eating out just as much as you cook. Because I think that there's just as much value in sitting in that seat and getting served food, and what does it feel like to be in that seat? That's just as important as being behind the stove. Do you have anything to expand on that with, or maybe you can tell, is there a meal that you've had recently that has kind of opened your eyes or inspired you in recent memory?
I mean, one that always be one for me, which I think you're just a spoiled brat. No, I'm kidding. But it was last year I got to eat at Per Se.
Hell yeah!
And like sitting down and having, for me, one of like maybe 2 or 3 cookbooks that I really took recipes from and actually tried like the whole recipe the way it's supposed to be was the French Laundry Cookbook. Mm-hmm. And so you're trying, the oysters and pearls and different recipes that were in the book, and seeing, oh, like, wow, this is how it's supposed to be. That experience was incredible. Mm-hmm. Not just from like me being a cook and appreciating what was on the plate, but also, here you are in a incredible restaurant, 3 Michelin stars, and everything is so thought out and detailed, and you can tell everything's intentional. So I think taking your experiences, whether it's, high end, low end, whatever, and seeing, what it's like, what could be different, what could be better, and just having that experience, I think, like you said, super helpful, whether it's about cooking or it's about, if you're in a restaurant, like, what do you want your restaurant to feel like if you're the customer? And mm-hmm. why does the customer feel this certain way? Based on the way that the customers interacting with the staff. So just understanding how it all works and how every dining experience is different. So getting kind of a good understanding of that and just being clear on that, I think, is really helpful for what you can do better next time or for your first time around.
Right. I remember when we would have certain topics that would come up at the last restaurant that I worked at, my chef, it was my chef's first restaurant with kind of like his name on it. And when we would come up with those questions, you know, like when the couple opens a bottle of wine, do we bring over an ice bucket or do we leave it on the table? And his kind of every single reference would come down to what would he like when he was going out to eat. And he had such a good frame of reference on what he enjoyed about dining experiences, because he enjoys it. He loves going out to eat. So he took a lot of those principles, and when he did finally have his own restaurant, he could finally apply that. And I think it's so important. I remember we had a chef de partie who was plating a cheese course, and the way that they plated it this one time was just not good. And I was like, what do you want me to change about it? And he's like, I want you to sit them down in the dining room next week and have them eat the full meal and give them the cheese course, and ask them to go around town and have a couple of cheese plates around town, because this person has not eaten cheese courses a lot in their life. And that was just so profound for me. I was like, whoa.
Right. How would you want to eat it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you have to trust yourself to have that judgment, because hopefully you as the chef is just as well versed as the diner in being in those shoes. It gives you that empathy, right, to know what it's like from their perspective.
And I think there's also kind of a counter to that, which is sometimes you're so close to it, especially a cook or a chef, like you're so close to it that sometimes you don't see the big picture. So being willing to hear, maybe it's a customer, maybe it's the owner or investor or whoever, hearing a different perspective and seeing, well, maybe somebody else has something to say that could be valuable here as well.
With writing, now you and I have spoken about kind of your cooking a little bit, you're teaching a little bit, you're writing a little bit. What is the ratio of kind of like your day-to-day right now?
I try and compartmentalize things. So I'll try and spend, blocks of time. So actually today is a podcast day. I just finished a podcast. I think I told you with Scott Conant.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing this. Had another kind of similar kind of conversation before that. I'm actually an adjunct professor at the culinary school here in Virginia. So I'm doing that in 4-hour chunks a couple days a week. And then writing primarily the rest of the time. Slash creating content and media, for the personal brand.
Sure. Are you happy with where that's at? Would you like to do you enjoy kind of the multifaceted life and kind of being able to dabble in a couple different things at the same time? I know that I've been struggling with it because I'm used to just having one job. You go in every day, you have a really long shift of doing the same thing, and then it's like either you're working or you're not working. Right.
I like it. I'm not sure that I'm the best at it because, I'm super ADD. I like not having the same job every single day at the same time. I do have trouble compartmentalizing things. I do have trouble going, not bouncing from one thing to the next. So it's a balance, and a lot of the work that I do too is on my home office here. So when you have work to get done, whether it's writing or getting the email newsletter to send out or publish a new article, whatever it is, it's easy to say, oh, like the laundry needs to get done, or I can go to the kitchen and make some stuff for dinner. So
yeah, it's like you're always on, but you're not ever like really on. Is there something about being in the kitchen that you miss?
One thing, doing some consulting work, I do get a chance to play around with folks, on new recipes, recipe development, and a little bit of the creative stuff. It's a little bit different because it's not necessarily my creative stuff. It's fun to be able to troubleshoot a recipe or a dish and put it on your menu and say, like, this is what we came up with as a staff, and you being the chef, putting it on there for yourself. At the same time, I do get to do that some through some consulting, but I think more than anything, I miss, like I think like a lot of us, being in the trenches is as grueling as those 10-hour days can be. You're fighting through service, and you get to the end, and there's something about breaking down your station and looking around, and everybody's kind of winding down, cleaning their cutting boards and tidying things up, and something about that kind of sensation and feeling is something I think most cooks will probably always miss once they aren't in the kitchen every day.
Right. For me, it's definitely the like 10 minutes right before the doors open. Like,
oh yeah,
it's that hype, like right up before it. And I don't get that every day anymore. And it's something that I definitely, when I was writing this question for you, I thought about like, how would I answer it? And that's, I don't know. There's something about it. There's so many things, there's so many elements that don't carry over in normal life. And it totally made me understand why the kitchen draws certain people, because it's a rush. It's definitely a rush.
It's like the athlete who's like in the tunnel about to come out.
That's exactly what it is. What do you think chefs can be doing to help better this next generation? I know there's a lot of talk right now about good cooks are really hard to find. It's really hard to find good help these days. What can chefs be doing better to help the next generation?
I think that's one of the $1 million questions. And if I were to have any insight on it, I think it would be, when we're bringing people in to be a part of our team, to be a part of our staff, like to really invest in them. I think before 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before you or I were ever around, it was oh, this is my recipe and I'm gonna keep it close to the vest and I'm not gonna share it with you. Now it's a lot of sharing, it's a lot of bringing people into what we're doing, but are we bringing in? Damn, it's loud as hell. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But are we bringing people in, with their best interest in mind? So you're giving them the tools and the resources, not to just be a successful cook or chef, because let's face it, a lot of folks are maybe not on the higher end, but a lot of folks that are in this industry for a couple years, kind of passing through, and speaking with Richard Blaze, he knows that he was saying how I know that some of my cooks or servers want to start their own t-shirt companies. So if I know that when they come in, I can start to teach them a little bit about what it means to be a business owner and some of those tools and give them some of those resources and understanding of what it's like to run a business from the top down. So I think investing in people will probably get us the farthest, because we can only afford to pay a certain amount based on what the margins are, and those margins won't ever be huge. So how can we kind of squeeze the most juice out of the lemon, I guess you'd say. And I think the way to do that is really to get people to buy into the staff and to invest in people so they want to be around, because they know that, hey, like chef or owner or whoever wants to see me succeed, not just in their business, but in life and in my career.
Right. And I think that's where I see a lot of problems with those cliche chef interviews where it's like, you need to keep your head down, you need to be obedient, you need to be focused. Because then when that conversation comes around where chef says, hey, what are you interested in? How can I help you? You kind of get that cliche answer of like, I want to work for you. I want to as opposed to, because the door swings both ways, where the employee should then feel comfortable saying, I do love t-shirts and I do want a t-shirt business. So then when the chef gets that opportunity of like, hey, we're going to start doing merch, we need t-shirts, you can be like, oh, perfect. I know just the person to ask about this.
It's an on-the-job training. And I think a lot of that kind of starts with onboarding. When you interview somebody, asking them, what are your goals? Like, do you want to be in this industry long term? If you don't, then okay, well, what do you want to do? So we can kind of start to tailor the messaging and the way we interact with you in a certain way.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of people have that fear in them that they won't get hired if they don't give the answer that the employer wants to hear, which, I mean, it's different for everyone, right? There is that person who wants that classic answer, but I think more and more, like you said, it's becoming much more the norm that, the math doesn't work out in restaurants, right? So it's like, it's okay to not have that as your final destination.
Right. And at least, if someone wants to open that t-shirt company down the road and they tell us that up front, at least we know we have somebody honest with us, you know? And I think we'd all rather have somebody that's honest. I think honesty a lot of times translates into somebody that's going to work hard, that's going to be dependable and reliable. And if they're running late, they're probably just running late. They're not actually, doing whatever.
Totally. I have a couple of rapid fire questions for you, and that'll kind of close it out. It's a Saturday morning. It's your first day off after a work week. It doesn't have to be a Saturday. You're standing in front of your kitchen. How do you make your eggs in the morning?
Over easy.
Would that change if you made eggs for, a chef that you admire or someone else in your life? Do you still make them over easy eggs, or is there kind of an egg technique that you like to flex on?
Well, every weekday morning, I'll do some over medium eggs for my fiance because that's how she likes them. Usually because she's on the go, which means that it's usually in between like a over medium and like almost well, because that way she can eat a bite of her egg sandwich and it's not going to run all over the place.
Do you have a little bit
still got a little juice to it?
Yeah. Do you have a little bit of pride in that execution? Because it's not easy.
Every time.
Get that just right. Yeah.
I'm like, what time are you walking out the door this morning? Because if it sits too long, then it'll continue to cook and it'll be done.
Oh man!
So yeah,
true.
and then on the weekends, a lot of times I'll make her like a smoked salmon Benedict or something like that. Definitely some poached eggs and a quick hollandaise. But she knows that she better be behaving that week if she's gonna get something nice.
Absolutely. Name an ingredient that you're obsessed with right now, if you have one.
Oh gosh, just planted the seeds to the garden, so I'm excited about all the herbs we have that are starting to sprout up. Some lemon thyme. I didn't have any sage last year, so I'm excited about using some sage, especially in some cocktails.
Awesome.
I love a good basil, especially around the garden. I mean, I feel like whether it's in food or a drink or a sauce, I feel like nothing like fresh basil that's nice and ripe out of the garden.
What is a cookbook that you've gifted most or are most likely to recommend to someone just starting out?
Probably the Flavor Bible.
Got it. I did a big breakdown of that. Well, I'm planning on doing it. There was a book that I covered that does something similar to the Flavor Bible where they'll do like flavor combinations, but it's so valuable. That book is so good.
Yeah. And I mean, if I ever get in a rut, I'll find something at the farmer's market that I might not be real familiar with and open up the Flavor Bible and see kind of what works. And it's definitely for anyone that's looking to kind of expand their culinary horizons. I think it's a great way to kind of have some fun, whether it's at home or in the kitchen at work. It's like
a thesaurus for chefs, right? Like coming up with different words or like what works together.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah. That's the best way to put it.
Is there a technique that you're still intimidated by in the kitchen?
That's a good question. Maybe souffling. On occasion, only because you obviously have to be pretty precise with your measurements and everything. But just because it's so delicate and the shelf life for a nicely risen souffle isn't very long.
Yeah, it's no joke.
But aside from that, I think I'm pretty good.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, I start to look at some crossover stuff where it's like I see the guys who are like hand stretching noodles. I'm like, I would have no idea what I'm doing with some of that stuff. Yeah, I mean, but I feel like I get it down pretty fast.
I mean, yes, some of the crossover stuff, especially when you start bringing in other cuisines and cultures. Yeah, I would. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable making homemade ramen noodles, but
yep.
I think I can get it down after a couple weeks worth of practicing.
You somehow get a call right after this interview that you've just won like an all expenses paid trip to eat at your dream restaurant. And then when you get there, there's someone you've always wanted to talk to waiting to have dinner with you. What restaurant is?
So it's probably the French Laundry. And the person is probably Nick Saban.
Okay.
So for anyone listening who doesn't know, he's a football coach. I went to Alabama. He's our football coach. But he's been wildly successful in early stages of his career. He was kind of bouncing around and got a lot of flack for that. But later he's kind of really I think, gotten clear on, why he does it and the type of work that he does. And I really respect, he talks about the process of, and it's actually very similar to Thomas Keller. So French Laundry might be a good place to have that conversation. But he talks about the process of just showing up every day and getting a little bit better and focusing on each play and each practice, not focusing on championships. If you focus on the task you have at hand, in very little small increments, you put those increments up against each other, and you have something to be proud of.
Absolutely. Do you think he's into food at all? Do you think you would?
I don't think he is. I don't think he's into much of anything except for success on the football field and maybe his family.
Well, just tell him that it's a 3-star Michelin restaurant. He'll probably go along with it.
I don't think he even knew. There was I think it was in 2016 when there was the presidential election. He didn't even know it was voting day.
Oh my God, so head down, too focused.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of how like Keller. You would know better than I, but how he kind of comes across with just very doing everything a certain way, every single time the right way, but then you look and see too that why these individuals are doing things a certain way, and it's really to instill a certain level of, I guess, care and thoughtfulness in the people around them, so that they can be successful themselves.
Absolutely. Where can people find you online and get in touch? I know you've got your 10-day challenge on your site. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so on my website, chrishillonline.com. If you hop on there, you can join. I have a 10-day chef brand building challenge, which really is a challenge to. I'll send an email every single day for 10 days, and it's really a challenge to get people to step outside of their comfort in the kitchen and start building a brand for themselves. So using the cooking chops they have and taking that outside the kitchen to get some awareness to understand how they can create more opportunities for themselves in and out of the kitchen.
And is there any other platforms you'd like people to check your stuff out on, whether it's
I have a pretty engaged following over on Facebook, which is Chef Chris Hill, and love for folks to check out the podcast as well, which is called Making the Cut, which is named after my first book. And I host that with my buddy Sean Winter, who founded Entrepreneurial Chef. So we had Jeremiah Tower on there, Richard Blaze, some other great folks is in and out of the culinary world. So definitely love for people to check that out as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, man.
Justin, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me, buddy. I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Emulsion podcast. I appreciate your ears more than you know. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help sponsor the show, head on over to patreon.com/Justin Khanna. Other ways you can help out right now include giving this show a review on iTunes so more people can find it. I also love seeing you folks liking and commenting on the video if you listen that way, or even just share this episode with a friend. Now is normally where I would tell you that my name is Justin Khanna and I hope you have a good one, but you've probably got another podcast episode to listen to, so I'm just gonna get out of the way here. Excuse me.